Okay, so we're going to go ahead and use for this project on our 50mm lens project, and we're going to switch to manual mode. And the reason for that is manual mode is going to give us the ability to change the aperture on the lens. And I'm going to show you what that does by taking a look at this. One thing you want to be able to do is go to the Q menu and make sure that you've got, two settings. I might as well show it since I'm here. Make sure you put the movie size on 24 frames per second. And then you're also wanting to change the autofocus method to point focus so that you can push and pull focus by just touching on the screen, because it's really hard to see focus when you're looking at a tiny screen, but it's easier to let the camera do the work. So you see that white square there. When I put the white square on my subject, it puts that subject into focus. If I push it back to the back of the room, it'll shift focus to the back of the room. Now, the reason why we're using manual mode on this camera is it's going to give us some control over a couple of settings. First of all, ISO. ISO, if you set it to automatic, is going to be your best bet because it's going to adjust the sensitivity of the lens based on the settings so that you don't accidentally overexpose or underexpose your shot. You've got exposure compensation, where you can intentionally brighten up the shot or darken the shot by adding stops. So that's up high by almost two and a third stops, and this is down to 3, which will make it darker. Generally, it's set to 0 to just properly expose the scene as the camera decides. Then along the bottom, you've got 2 other ones. One is your shutter speed. The minimum is going to be 25 because it's at 24 frames per second. So it's only going to be able to go 1/25 of a second and still keep up with the frame rate. As you increase that, you're going to sharpen things that are in motion, but you're also going to deprive the camera of light. And there's going to be a point, like 1/4,000th of a second, you can see that the camera is no longer properly exposing the shot because it doesn't have enough time to. The lens is it's only going to be open for 1/4,000th of a second. So you can keep it relatively low if you get enough light, and it should still work. But the real key here is this function right here, the aperture setting. And right now it's down to the minimum, 1.8. That's what the lens was designed for. And in that, you have a real narrow depth of field. So you can see the TIE Fighter, but you can't see the background. And as I change that and make that, it's weird, the number goes up, but the size of the aperture goes down. And that, again, means that as I push this number up, and the size of the aperture that lets in light goes down, I'm actually going to get to another point where you're going to see that it's too dark because there's not enough light being let in. However, when you find that middle ground, and go ahead and pay attention to the chair and the desktop in the background. Right now, that narrow depth of field really isolates the TIE Fighter. As I increase that, the background comes more into focus. And that's why we're going to be using manual mode. So you do have to pay attention to the exposure levels. Keep that on auto and make sure that you have, one of the things you could do if it starts to get dark, for example, if I go up to 22 and I really want a deeper depth of field, I might have to go, let me get that to 22. I might have to go over to my
shutter speed
and decrease
shutter speed.
So I'm letting a little bit more time to let the light in, and that'll compensate for it. So when you're on manual mode, you always have to be adjusting those 2 numbers and for each setting, and every time the light changes, it doesn't necessarily use the same setting that you did before. So it's just, you've got to pay attention to what you're seeing and adjust every time.